So in this video, we're going to spend a little bit of time getting comfortable with the Gumball as a controller for our objects. And I'm in a model that I've been using for some tutorials on lighting. And the way we're going to use the Gumball is we're going to make some sort of sculptural object, an arrangement of kind of circular cutout shapes, flat disks that are stacked in space. And we're going to use the Gumball to maneuver those with some intention. I'm first going to select my floor and hide, and then I'm going to make a circle here with a diameter of, I think, 3 feet. That looks a little small. I'm going to run my command offset with a distance of 12. Select that circle, offset, run it again, offset. I'm just going to make a few copies here. There we go, like that. And I think this is going to be large and wide at the bottom, get smaller in the middle and wider up at the top. So for the top, I'm going to select those two circles, and I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to extrude up by 1 inch. And importantly, my solid is set to yes. And what that gives me is a solid disk with a center hole that's cut out. And at the base of my screen, I'm going to make sure my Gumball is enabled. And I can see my Gumball when I select an object. I see this controller that gives me a blue, red, and green arrow, as well as a green and red and blue quarter arc or quarter circle, and a red and green dashed line with a square. My arrows allow me to move. If I select an arrow and click and drag on it, my movement is restricted to that direction. Likewise with my green and my red. My arcs allow me to restrict my rotation. So if I restrict my my green rotation, I'm rotating on 90 degrees. It looks like my ortho is also turned on, so I'm going to turn off my ortho or orthographic snap. And now as I rotate, I'm locked on my green axis, locked on my red axis, and my dashed lines are for scaling. So I can scale in one direction and scale. Oops. It's a little hard to see. Let's maneuver so we can really grab it. Well, it's hard to select that with this model, but that red is also a scale. So I'm going to just undo a little bit of this and look at moving this close to the ceiling. Now I can click and drag as we've seen to move, but I can also, for any of these commands, I can click once on them instead of dragging, and then I get a numeric field and I can type in a certain amount. For instance, 12, 12. Let's just get this up close to the ceiling. That's about right. And then I'm going to make, I think, this extrude 2 inches. So I'm going to make a number of these, and I'm using that Gumball to arrange them. Maybe I'll make these extrude. There we go. And then for my very middle one, I'm going to make a solid. So I can begin to arrange these. Maybe I will, in a moment, rotate them a little bit, but for now, I think I'm pleased with this. I'm actually going to switch out to a front view. I'm going to hide some of my model. This will make it easier for me to see what I'm doing. So I want to use the same shapes below this middle platform. And if I hold down my Alt key on my keyboard and I drag out to move that object, notice it keeps the original and it makes a duplicate. So again, I'm going to this one, I'm holding down the Alt key, I'm clicking on the green arrow and dragging down. For the very top one, I'm going to do the same thing. And now I think I'm going to introduce just a little bit of kind of fun rotation to make these all a little kind of different. Maybe eventually we would make some sort of cable system that would suspend all of these together. And maybe I'm even going to scale them a little differently, just to create some fun differences in my model. Yeah, something like that. I happen to have a view built in that brings me back to a camera viewpoint. I'm going to show to unhide all of my objects. I'm actually going to move my camera a little bit over like this, and let's define a new camera viewpoint. So in my named views, I'm going to put this new, and let's call this platforms viewpoint. And now if I were to render, looks like I shut off my V-Ray menu. So I'm going to open my V-Ray compact menu and I'm going to render. And this scene is the same scene I was using for some daylighting and wood floor studies. I think in order to see these platforms, I'm going to put a lacquer material of some kind on them. So let's go to materials, create, maybe I'll just call them panels, apply to selection. Let's make it dark with some reflection. And let's make it kind of a dark red with some pretty sharp reflection. And now if I render, I should be able to see these a little better against the wood floor and against the white walls. So I'm seeing these objects that I made through extrusions, but then I used the gumball to move them up in space, to duplicate them, to rotate them, and kind of make my arrangement of those objects in space. And eventually I could, if I wanted to, pin them with some sort of kind of elements that show them to be really hanging, because currently they're a bit just lost in space, hanging in space. And I can see the materiality. That dark red lacquer is very deep in tone, allows me to see these against a white background. And I'm seeing the reflection on the top surfaces reflecting the wood floor and the white walls. So that's a little bit of using the gumball in Rhino.